The Whisperer in White Pine. The first time I heard it was 3 weeks after we moved to the reservation. A sound like dry leather scraping on glass, somewhere beyond our back porch. My grandmother's face went pale when I mentioned it at breakfast. She whispered something in Navajo to my grandfather, who nodded gravely and left the table without finishing his coffee. "Listen to me carefully," she said, her weathered hands clasping mine with unexpected strength. "If you hear that sound again, you come inside immediately. Don't look for it, don't speak to it, and never, ever whistle after dark." I was 16 then, too full of city skepticism to take her warning seriously. We'd moved from Phoenix after my father died, returning to the reservation where my mother had grown up. The transition from suburban sprawl to isolated desert homestead had been jarring enough without adding my grandparents' superstitions to the mix. 2 nights later, I heard it again. I was reading by my bedroom window, enjoying the cool desert air after sunset. That same scraping sound, but closer now, accompanied by something else, a soft, rhythmic clicking like deer hooves on stone. Despite myself, I peered into the darkness. Nothing moved in the moonlight. The juniper trees stood silent sentinels against the star-filled sky. But as I started to turn away, I caught a glimpse of something pale moving at the edge of our property where the yard meets the scrubland. Something tall and thin, walking on all fours yet somehow wrong in its proportions. I blinked, and it was gone. The next morning, my grandfather found tracks in the dirt. Not animal, not human, but something in between. He burned sage in every room of the house that day, muttering prayers I couldn't understand. That evening, my grandmother sat me down and told me about skinwalkers. Not the sanitized versions I'd read about online or seen in horror movies, but the real thing, Yi Nald Lushi, those who have chosen to walk the witching path, who have killed their own blood relatives for power, who can wear animal skins to transform themselves. They are drawn to disbelief, she warned. They feed on fear, on attention. Never speak of them directly. Never acknowledge their presence. And if one calls your name in a voice you recognize, someone you love who isn't home, don't answer. I tried to dismiss her words as old superstition, but that night I dreamed of skin stretched over bones at impossible angles, of eyes reflecting firelight like mirrors, of something wearing my father's face but moving all wrong. I woke gasping, certain someone had whispered my name. Days passed. I began noticing small disturbances around our property. Porch furniture rearranged, my grandmother's herb garden disturbed, our dog refusing to go outside after sundown. One morning, I found a dead coyote at the end of our driveway, its body contorted unnaturally, its eyes missing. My grandfather buried it without a word. That night, I heard my father's voice calling from the darkness beyond my window. "Just come talk to me," it said. "I miss you. Don't you miss me?" The voice was perfect, the exact timbre and cadence of my father's speech, down to the way he'd slightly stressed the second syllable of my name. But something in it rang false, like hearing a recording played backward then forward again. I remembered my grandmother's warning and pulled my blankets tighter, whispering prayers she'd taught me until dawn broke. The next evening, my mother announced she was driving into town for supplies. 2 hours later, headlights swept across our front yard. I went to the door, expecting her return, but the car didn't pull up to the house. Instead, it idled at the end of our long driveway, high beams blazing. My phone chimed with a text, "Come help with groceries." I stepped onto the porch, then hesitated. Something felt wrong. I called my mother's cell, and it went straight to voicemail. As I stood there, uncertain, the car's horn blared. 3 short bursts, our family signal. My grandfather appeared beside me, gripping my arm with iron fingers. "Your mother's car broke down 20 miles from here," he said quietly. "She just called the landline. That's not her out there." We watched as the headlights finally switched off. In the sudden darkness, I could just make out a figure standing beside the car, too tall, limbs too long, head cocked at an impossible angle. That night, we barricaded the doors and windows. My grandfather stood vigil with his rifle, though he told me bullets might slow it, but wouldn't stop it. "It wants permission to enter," my grandmother explained. It wants acknowledgement. Deny it both and it will eventually seek easier prey. But it didn't leave. For 3 nights it circled our home, wearing different faces, using different voices. Sometimes my father's, sometimes friends from school I hadn't seen since Phoenix. It mimicked our dog's bark so perfectly that twice I nearly opened the door before catching myself. On the 4th night, something scratched at my bedroom window, nails or claws dragging slowly down the glass. I lay frozen, watching a silhouette darker than the night sky fill my window frame. It pressed what should have been a face against the glass, but the proportions were all wrong. Eyes too widely spaced, jaw elongated beyond human possibility. It smiled, showing too many teeth. "I'm so cold out here," it whispered in my father's voice. "Please, just invite me in. Don't you recognize me?" I closed my eyes and recited my grandmother's prayers until sunrise. We found my mother's car abandoned on the reservation road the next day, driver's door open, keys still in the ignition. The search parties found nothing else. She returned 3 days later, walking out of the desert at dawn, dehydrated and disoriented, with no memory of where she'd been. The doctors found nothing physically wrong with her, but her eyes never seemed to focus properly afterward, and sometimes I'd catch her staring at me with an expression I couldn't recognize. We never spoke of what happened. My grandparents performed cleansing ceremonies for weeks. Eventually, the scratching stopped, the voices faded, and life resumed its normal rhythm. But sometimes, even now, years later, I wake to the sound of dry leather scraping on glass. And on those nights, I lie still until morning, careful never to look toward my window, never to answer when something calls my name in a voice I almost recognize. Because what wears my mother's skin now isn't my mother at all.